You suggested the title for today's talk of Life Beyond Cliche, which I thought was very interesting and very fitting because, as I said, my experience of you is as a total original. But what inspired you to suggest that as the topic for today? What does that mean to you?
Well, originality is something that I hold in great esteem. I think creativity is generally thought of as taking something that was before and tweaking it and representing it. I think there is another possibility, and that other possibility is, what would you invent if it were you? Of course, nobody's going to invent from the beginning, but invention can happen. And so when I use the word cliche, I don't only mean cliche in terms of terminology, because we share the same language, more or less. I mean cliche in terms of attitude as well. Cliche in terms of presentation and creativity, that although something can look like it's happened before, let's try to present it like it's never happened, and it's actually happening as a creation of something that has passed through us and gone through a transition and come out the way it is, rather than copying something in the past.
Right, because most of us, most of the time, are more like living on automatic pilot and pressing play on programs that we've run through many times before. Yeah.
Well, some of them are very attractive programs, and some of them are beautiful programs, but originality, in a way, in my view, is more beautiful. Coarse originality is more beautiful than smooth, what you describe, imitation.
Right. And this kind of originality that you're talking about is related in what way to what we might call spiritual liberation or awakening or enlightenment?
Right. Well, if, as Hermann Hesse says, we're all unique creations on the part of the Creator, then what necessitates reconnection is that we be who we are. If we can't be who we are, then we're imitating someone else, and our chance for that reconnection is diminished. So the thread should go through who we are, discovering who we are, manifesting who we are, and that in some way will be original if we are indeed unique creations, unique experiments on the part of the Creator.
Mm-hmm. And isn't it, yeah, I mean, I'm a musician, and the music that feels most creative to me, that I enjoy the most, are the times when I feel like I am most out of the way. When it's sort of like being a conduit or something, that life is...
I've played music with you too, and the best experiences I have also when you were out of the way.
Right. And you can feel the difference between when I was in the way or out of the way. Yeah. Thank you for that, I guess.
Well, we got to get humor into here.
Of course, and I'm glad, and we've got to get ribbing in here. In fact, that reminds me of several topics. I have like way more that I want to cover today than we can possibly get to, but we'll just start where we are and see where it leads us. You're talking not only about a general life beyond cliche, but a practice, a spiritual practice or a path beyond cliche, because of course, like so many other arenas, spiritual practice becomes totally cliche ridden. And like I say, that's part of why I'm fascinated to explore with you, is because I see you approaching it and hear you talking about it in a way that seems unique and original. And one of the things that I see you talking about that's different is that a lot of spiritual practice ends up being like a self-improvement project, like I'm going to become a better person, or I'm going to be good now, or something like that. And as I hear you describing it, that sounds like movement in exactly the wrong direction, where what we're looking for is a process of subtraction rather than addition, not trying to become something, but rather to get out of the way.
Well, it depends very much on what a person is looking for. Certainly no one would, and I wouldn't, diminish the process of self-improvement if that's what a person wanted to do. If a person seeks certain areas of their life that they see as deficient and should change, then the person would certainly naturally address themselves to that aspect of life. I really have recognized that that this interconnection that we talk about is a natural phenomenon that exists beneath all the personality and all the manifestations of human beings, and if the possibility exists that we could reconnect to this energy that keeps it all going, the possibility exists that the way we lean the weight of our lives on these different qualities that we have, and the different capacities that we have, and the different possessions that we have, and the different skills that we've had, would come more into balance, because the weight of our lives can't really rest on those relationships, but they can rest from where they came. So basically what I sponsor and what I encourage is doing what's necessary to rediscover that interconnection. And as you say, that process very often requires subtraction. See what it would be like without, and not gross things like see what it would be like without money or without food or anything like that, but see what it would be like without a little bit less reputation, a little bit less self-image, a little bit less pride, a little less ego, a little bit less reactivity and anger, and see if that's going in the direction of a rediscovery. And so that's where I'm at.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it seems that your style of teaching reflects that, in the sense that, like, Justin's written 4 books, all of which I have read and enjoyed, under the pen name Jaye, Jaye Gold, and in your books, you tell stories and you share points of view, and they're not how-to books. And I've heard you say that actually that approach to spirituality, reading how-to books and stuff like that, which is perhaps, again, one of the cliches of spiritual practice, is like, here, read my book and I'll tell you how to wake up and such. But you say that that doesn't really work, that kind of how-to teaching is easily co-opted and not very useful.
Well, this is something I learned from my own experience, that because I had a mentor, a very important person in my life, and I could say that person really taught me no specifics other than helped me learn how to explore. I do know how to learn, I do know how to explore, I do know how to ask questions. And I see that as the most valuable of the assets that I have picked up in actually from another person, which could also be conceivably from another book. So my valuation for input has come from more oblique input from stories and movies and songs, where I could actually extract what was meaningful to me rather than to have somebody tell me, this is what you should learn from that, this is what you're going to be learning now, this is what you're going to be doing now, because in my opinion, people have powerful capacity to extract what's important for them if they can relax into that extraction. And that's where very frequently narcotics or mind-altering substances have come in, because they have assisted a person in that relaxing process so that they could take in what was meant for them from a song, from a book, from even from a talk such as this. So I quote this lyric from a song, "Take what you can and leave the rest," because there's always something that you don't need, but if there is something that you can get, as from this talk, as from the words I'm saying right now, that's what's of value, what you can extract. Now, fairy tales and songs really lend themselves to that, especially if the lyrics and the words are abstract, because they don't in themselves mean something. A fairy tale like The Last Unicorn or the Narnian Chronicles, you can't say that you're reading about a mouse, or you're reading about a magician, or you're reading about a unicorn or a bull. You're reading about something that, if it means something to you, you can extract it, and you can learn from it, and it may even help you open the next door, or arrive at the next door for you to walk through. So I'm definitely a proponent of what you might call the indirect method. It also is a fail-safe against imagining you're learning something that you're really not learning because you memorize.
So I think Justin just said that you should probably smoke some weed and listen to this again, and maybe you'll get more out of it that second time. So if that oblique method is more reliable than the how-to, how much hope is there for people without direct mentorship to go very far? Because I've also heard you say that in addition to this oblique learning, probably the most powerful spiritual help you can have is a master such as yourself, who works closely with you and helps you in that subtraction process, helps you in the diminution of I.
I think if a person can learn how to learn, there are innumerable sources from which to learn. I'll get to the position that I play in a moment, but for the learning process and for everyone, whether someone has a mentor or someone doesn't have a mentor, being receptive and learning the clues and learning that to extract the clues and learning to recognize in themselves when they're open and when they're less than open, even in this moment, open or less than open. Are you listening to me and criticizing? Or are you listening to me and giving a chance to, maybe this guy knows something? Probably he doesn't. Probably he's full of shit like everybody else. Probably he's faking it. And probably I am. But what if I'm not? Because if I say I'm not, the possibility exists that maybe I'm not full of shit. Of course, the possibility exists that I am. But if the possibility did exist that I wouldn't it be worth it to give it a chance? And can you give it a chance? So a person can assess so much for themselves, and if a person continues to assess for themselves, it's my perspective and my opinion that the doors will open for that person, and whatever is needed will appear along the line, whether it's someone that plays my position or someone that doesn't. Now, in terms of the uniqueness of the position that I play, I considered it really important, because the door that really leads to the connection that's been lost, the interconnection with the energy that keeps us alive, that connection that's been lost, that door that directly leads there is the door of meditation. And meditation, as I understand it, is an extremely passive process. Because what you're doing is you're submitting to something that you didn't create. You're submitting now. You might be sitting quietly in a room, you might be looking at a candle, you might be following your breath, but you're not trying to discover your breath. You already have a breath. You're trying to discover the energy behind that breath, hidden beneath and behind that breath. So you have to become passive in relation to that. And where in our world, do we learn passivity? We learn that passivity is the enemy. Get active, make it happen, get control, get a position, get money, get reputation, so that you can control. Now, control is not what's required if you're sitting and petitioning that energy to appear for you, when in all your activity and moving around, it will never appear for you because you're too busy. So some training ground is really needed, a training ground for that passivity. Now, of course, it has to be a safe training ground, not a training ground where somebody's going to tell you, do this, do that, do this, do that, do this. I don't tell people really to do anything. 98% of the time, if a person asks me what to do, including put this together, what we've done, it's you guys decide, you guys decide, you guys decide. Every once in a while I'll say something, if I think the train is going off the cliff, which doesn't happen often, but it can happen. But otherwise, to have someone in that position is, and be with that person and be exposed to that person, so that you don't have to trust them, but you see they're for real. And you know, as much as you've taught that we're all here, that we're not all here in terms of our quantum mechanics skill. I'm certainly here. We're not all here in terms of our swimming skill. I'm certainly here. We're not all here in terms of etc., etc., etc. Now, if a person has put in 50 years of concentrated time in exploring this question, not trying to make money, not trying to get famous, not trying, etc., that person probably has picked up a few things along the line. So it's possible that that person could play that role. And it's possible that that role is needed. And in my opinion, it's very supportive. Now, is it absolutely necessary? I can't say that it is, because I didn't create the design. I'm far below the pay level of the creator of this design. So I can't say that at all. But I can say it's definitely helpful.
Yeah, and you just touched on another interesting non-cliche practice and teaching that I've experienced around here, which is, there's a billion books on meditation and courses on meditation, and here's how to meditate and stuff like that, and yet you say meditation is the ultimate but not the first order of business, that it's not even, you're not going to teach people how to meditate unless there's a kind of a process and a relationship.
Well, it would seem reasonable to me that if meditation is a fine entry into a fine door, a rarefied door and a fine entry, even though it's a very natural process, we are far from natural beings, because what we've been taught and what some of us succeeded considerably in is building our presentation. Presentation is not natural. Presentation is developed. So until we can shed a little bit of that presentation, how can we go through that door? How do we have the fineness of level to go through that door? If our lives are rushed, if our lives are anxious, if our lives are reactive to jealousy and anger and annoyance and the different difficulties that we have, if our minds are chaotic, if we haven't really learned how to operate this computer in terms of thinking, that everything is not supposed to be in random access memory, and it only appears in random access memory, RAM, because we're anxious in situations that it won't be there for us. So in this situation here, I don't rehearse. I don't think about what I'm going to say. I know it's there. It's in the fucking cloud. I don't have to carry it in here. At least it's in the hard drive, but it doesn't have to be here. So if a person feels they have to keep it all here, then of course they're going to be talking to themselves all the time. How could they not? How can you not talk to yourself all the time if you need to keep everything here just in case you might need it in a situation? You're always on guard that you have to produce something. So that level of coarseness has to decrease to some degree, and then meditation can take place. The idea of combating that coarseness with meditation, I've described so many times, is the wrong use of that tool.
Right.
It will do it. You can use meditation to relax. As I've said before, you can use a router or a belt sander to pound a nail into a piece of wood. But it's not the right use of that tool.
Right.
And the right use of meditation is to help you to uncover for you so that you can realize that in a reality.
Because I guess normally people would be kind of trying to actively do meditating, as opposed to you're saying it's the ultimately passive process. And if your life is structured around do, then, and meditation becomes just another thing to do, you've lost the true potential of. And what about all the, tons of people out there who are very dedicated to their meditation practice that they either learned at a workshop or got from a book, or what would your advice be to them?
I'm not much on giving advice. I'm not an advice giver.
Right.
I ask questions and people can explore as they see fit. But in terms of advice, not so much. And also, we have to be clear here. My exposure to people that I've influenced has been relatively limited over the years. Over a lot of years, I've played this part, but my exposure has been limited in numbers to people. So I'm not soliciting people. I'm not having programs to bring people in. I work with a couple of dozen people, and it's gone as high as maybe 50, and it's gone as low as maybe a dozen. But usually in that range where I can have direct access and know what's going on with them, and they can know what's going on with me. And also that those parameters have been narrowed by other things. I see that progress, upward progress or finer progress happens from the middle, not from the edges, not from the peripheries. I don't promote diving to enlightenment from the periphery. I advise getting to the middle of the road. So a person who is very intellectually strong, I encourage that person to develop their emotions, and so on and so on. And so if somebody has talent in something, to develop something else, to get to a place where they're a balanced person. Because I learned a lesson. I used to teach swimming, and years ago I worked in a hotel where all the swimming people, and really anybody who could, entertained the guests by diving off the diving board, the relatively high diving board. This is in Acapulco Cliffs, but this is a diving board over a swimming pool. And so if you've ever watched diving, and especially backward diving, the key to backward diving is balance. So you walk to the end of the board, you turn around, and you put the front of your feet or your toes, a little more than your toes, on the board, and you try to achieve balance. You don't turn around and then boom, off the board. You get balance. I learned the importance of balance in that You don't take off till you get balanced. And I teach not taking off till you get balanced. So a lot of the focus of my work involves balance. Now, we have to add a codicil to that because there are some people that are just out of the range. There are some people that are bipolar, North Pole, South Pole. That's a big distance between North Pole, South Pole. I can handle about Sweden to Madagascar. But you get that, Sweden, North Pole, South Pole, Sweden. I can handle about that much. But North Pole, South Pole, I have to pass on. So if somebody tells me, well, I've had shock therapy and I'm this and I'm that, I said, listen, get yourself into the middle of the road, whatever you do, whatever you think is best, if it's therapy or whatever, do that, and then maybe we can talk. So I have that parameter, and I have other parameters at all also, because something I did when I was 19 years old was I exercised horses at the racetrack. Excuse me. And this is an interesting learning process, because when you first start exercising horses at the racetrack, you get a license to do that, and that license really allows you some flexibility. And so you have to use some judgment in what you're going to, which horses you're going to exercise. So the first time you exercise a 4-year-old stallion, which is about equivalent to a 21-year-old guy, they got a lot of ego. They got a lot of pride, they got a lot to prove, and you're sitting on their back. And if you ride one of these for 5 minutes, your hands are going to be so sore that you're not going to be able to do the next one. You're not going to make the money, because making the money comes out of exercising maybe 4 or 5 horses over a couple of hours. So you go back to the fillies and mares, right? So the fillies and mares are much more docile. Now I have interpreted that into my work, and you can draw your conclusion.
Very good. Yes. Discretion is the better part of valor. Isn't it? Okay.
Fillies and mares. Okay.
What? That's another interesting question that comes up around how spirituality becomes cliche. The whole possibility of enlightenment or liberation or awakening or all of that becomes caricatured, becomes a cliche in and of itself. What do you think? How would you describe what is possible for a human? And is that a matter of degree and development, or is that like a qualitative liberation?
Yeah, I'm not from the qualitative liberation school. As I've said before, I've heard of people that got a rock fallen on their head, and all of a sudden, etc. Now, I grew up in the Bronx, so we do have rocks there, and they do get flinged around some, and I have been hit by rocks, but never enlightenment rocks. So I don't come from that way of thinking. I don't know about that. If that happens to someone, it's incredible good fortune. Now, of course, if it happens in that way, that person can't recommend. The only thing that person can really recommend, because they weren't paying attention to the process, is go
get hit by a rock.
Go and look for a place where there's a lot of falling rocks. I don't think really good advice, but I don't know what else they could advise. Right. They could talk about their experience. They could be wise about their experience. But what another person could possibly have to do to get to that experience, a person would have had to pay scrupulous attention along the way. And that's basically what I was taught to do, and that's what I did. I paid scrupulous attention along the way at each step. So I know the steps that I took. Now, everybody isn't made in the same mold, so I have to look for similarities in people. So I've stuck mostly to people who come from our culture, who are relatively, I wouldn't say affluent, but haven't used their life and struggling for food, clothing, and shelter, and using those parameters. I think that the first example that you gave of it happening in degrees. So it's not a matter of I want to be a billionaire or nothing. It is great wealth in leaving some negative emotions behind. If you could live your life and be rid of blame, your life would be so much lighter. I get letters from people who I knew maybe for 2 or 3 years, and I haven't seen them since then. And the letters they generally write is, "I'm so grateful to have recognized this idea of taking responsibility and not blaming." That has been the growth, and so grateful. So anything that you get that you haven't had before, any freedom, any lightness that you get that you haven't before, is a tremendous gift. So it's not like like Zanzibar or bust. What it's like is like anything that makes your life lighter, makes your life happier, makes you a more giving person, makes you a more caring person, makes you feel more connected to things, is a boon, is a gift. And it does happen in increments. It happens little at a time. Sometimes very slowly, because real change is different than imaginary change. And as I've said before, at least once, that if you were in the desert and you were really thirsty, would you rather have an imaginary gallon of water or a real cup of water? Well, I have been in the desert, and I have been real thirsty. In fact, the Sahara Desert, and I know the difference. And I definitely can put myself back there and say, I would rather have a real cup of water than an imaginary gallon of water. So people sometimes ask, well, have you ever produced any graduates? And and it's a challenging question. And how far have the people around you gotten? I ran into one of them, and they didn't seem that together to me. Granted, the more growth, the more openness, the more doors walk through, the better. But if you look on the standard of what you imagine, and you live around people that complement each other constantly on the good things about them, and don't really see the self-destructive things about them, then
or don't speak to them even when they do see them.
Or that, then you get to imagine that those qualities actually exist to a depth, not just what I might call compartmentally. So if you match up that imagination to the reality of a person that understands the nature of blame and has gotten rid of 80% of it, that is monumental. And there are some people that I've known for a time who have gotten to that place, who understand some of these things about coarseness and understand them enough that they've changed in their life, actually. Now, in comparison to what one could present as a performance, certainly not. But in terms of a gallon of imagination and a cup of reality, there's considerable.
And is there then a sense of ever potentially being complete? Do you, in your own experience of the process, was there some sort of threshold you crossed where it's like, okay, now I'm not still progressively learning, I've actually arrived someplace?
Well, I'm always progressively learning. I'm learning right now. I'm learning something about the specifics, about the experience of sitting in meditation and leaving everything behind. Now, clearly, you're not leaving everything behind. You know it's going to be there. But you allow yourself to leave it behind in those moments. If you actually allow yourself to do that, if you can allow yourself to do that, if you even have some advantageous technique that will foster your doing that, and you can go behind, beneath, beneath. You can go inside, beneath, and you can leave all the emotions, all the thoughts, all the sensations, leave your body behind, leave all of it behind. There is something generating all that that's there. Now, if that something that's generating everything becomes your reality more than everything outside it becomes the reality, like the author becomes the reality more than the book becomes the reality, the creator becomes the reality more than the created becomes the reality. If that takes place, it becomes your reality. You're resting the weight of your life on what actually is, not what's been created from what is. Then the experience there is very different than any other experience. Now, to the degree that you have experienced and recognized that inner energy in a tangible form, that inner vibration in a vibrational form, not in a vibe form, but in a vibrational form, because you've gone back to where that motor is, not the motor of your heart or your lungs, but the motor that generates them. If you've gone there and even spent a few minutes there from time to time, a few moments there from time to time, then the weight of your life will naturally start to lean there and things will change for you. So everything is in gradients, but it all comes down to the extent to which you can rest your life on something that can hold that weight.
Okay. So not a qualitative shift in personality. Like some of these, one of the spiritual kind of tropes is that you shift in the sense of self, from an I to a non-dual kind of perspective.
I agree with that. I think it happens gradually. I think it can happen naturally because it's there. If it's not there, it's not going to happen. We are not creators. We're not going to make anything that's not except the buildings that we make and the cars that we make and the trouble that we make. We can make that, but we can't make this. So since we can't make this either externally or internally, what we have to do is discover something that we don't have to make. And I agree with that process. Personality does have to go through a shift. Not a radical shift quickly, but a shift. And that shift is very tangible. Personality involves a lot of self-image. And we learn self-image. We learn to build up our self-image. I think it's very important for a young person to build up their self-image. I've described before the cycles of life in which you start building up self-image. I would never, ever, ever teach a child to meditate. Never, ever, ever mention that word to a child. Now, to be able to sit still and do one thing at a time is definitely advantageous for a child, but not as advantageous as exploring and doing whatever calls out to you and be brave and take chances and be bold. At some point, that process can become repetitious. At some point after that, a person can want something other. Now, in that time, when a person starts wanting something other, then the possibility of leaving some of that personality behind arises. Before that, personality is very important. I would never tell a person who's trying to explore and develop their life, subdue your personality, get to know, I think being bold requires being stupid. Making mistakes, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're too wise, you're not going to make mistakes. Take chances, make mistakes. The developing process requires us going out. We're born to go out. We're also born to come home. But we're not born to go home till we go out.
It's interesting what you said just now about taking those risks and playing big. Reminds me again of my recent life where there was a inherently humbling process of falling on my face, and it seems that both your role as a teacher sometimes of pointing out to someone the way that their eye is getting in the way, too big in a given situation, or the role of life sort of giving you these feedbacks when you go ahead and take risks and sometimes fall on your face, that either way it helps soften that attachment to me.
It does temporarily, but a person a person in a situation can do anything. I mean, we see movie actors. We see what they do. We see what they performed. We see who they are. It's miraculous how they do that. And they have the sets and everything around them to tell them, yes, you are Spartacus. And sometimes when they get off the set and they go into their trailer, they go, I am Spartacus, you know. That's part of the training. And so actually to take those reflections or whatever you learn in those compartments and actually have them be your life is a whole different thing.
To actually integrate that.
To allow them to become integrated is definitely a challenge, because we all know how to put on a show. We all know how to do a seminar. We are seminarians. That's probably not the right word, but we won't go there. We all have that skill. We've learned to do that. We all know, okay, what's this party require? Okay, this party requires drinking and dancing. Okay, I can do that. I'll go in. Then we go into another thing called a classroom. Well, this is not, don't dance and drink here. It won't work here. Do this here. And then we go home. Okay, this requires saying, yeah, mom, yeah, mom, yeah, mom. Okay, I can do this. So we learn that. That is our most developed skill, compartmentalization.
So we learn to be like different selves in these different situations.
Exactly. And some of us who become smooth get good at it. Other people not so good at it. The people who we consider successes in ordinary life are good at it. They can sell us a story. You have to make sure I'm not this person, that I'm selling you a story and I'm good in this seminar, I'm good in this speech, I speak well, I tell good stories, I make jokes, I fuck around, you know? Maybe so. So somebody would have to get to know me to know that. That's why I say for somebody to really help you, there's two requirements that they have to have. Two requirements. One is they have to be able to mail a letter for you, and they have to be willing to pass the salt, able and willing to pass the salt to you. Those are the two. Now, if you can get somebody who's willing to do those things and able to do those things for you, you have the basics. That rules out everyone who's no longer alive. That rules out everyone who's not around you. So think of how many people that you have in your life that you imagine are helping you, but they're not around you, and they're no longer alive. Now, because their picture is on your wall, or your thoughts about them are in your head, they still are for you to manipulate. They are what you make them in any one moment. And you are compartmentalized in that way for yourself. You are what you make yourself in any one moment. You're the controller. And since you are that controller, some of that has to break down, and your compartmentalization has to break down. And in doing that, subtly, not in a traumatic way, but subtly, with help, what happens is some of these people that you are tend to pop up in other situations just because you're surprised. It's very enlivening. It's a little bit scary. It's a little bit unaccustomed. But it certainly is healthy for breaking down this thing that we're talking about called that I'm calling compartmentalization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking that sometimes the interventions with which you help point this out sometimes, in my experience, come across looking pretty feisty. And another spiritual cliche is kind of what we might call the love and light cliche, that, you know, sweetness is spiritual, and that that anger or feistiness or whatever wouldn't be. And yet there seems to be a method to your madness. So I assume it's intentional for you, that you sometimes kind of bring the sword or harsh.
There is a method to my madness, but there's no madness to my method. I basically agree with what you said in a what did you call it? Love and light.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with kindness. I wrote in the tweets that I put every day on Twitter, which I just joined, and I'm having a lot of fun trying to squeeze all my thoughts into that number of words. That I said something about pettiness, that pettiness is our collective adversary and our individual adversary as humans, and I do sincerely and deeply believe that, and I try to live that. I also believe that kindness is our most divine virtue, and kindness is, if I don't ever come from kindness, there is something severely wrong. Now, kindness, I'll tell you something about my life. When I lived in Santa Barbara and I started California, and I started a group there, soon after, maybe a year after, I decided, well, this is time to take these dozen people or so out on the road, meaning into the mountains, into the Andes, where I have some history, and who knows, maybe even meet this person who was one of my mentors, and but at least to get up there in the Andes and travel around, and some of those places are really far from, you might call, civilization, a few steps away, like 4 days travel from anything that could be considered a hospital or a doctor. So I thought, well, if I'm going to take people out there, I need to develop my emergency medical skills, and because I know the rudiments, but because I was a Boy Scout, but beyond that, not really so much. So I did. I spent a year, really a little more, a couple of years, and I got a certification as a EMT, and then I rode the 911 truck, the emergency truck, and I did hours at the emergency room in the hospital, and I did that for a couple of years. So I learned a lot, and I got certified as an EMT, and I did that, and I thought that was a good thing to do. Fortunately, I didn't have to use that on that trip, but I did go through that training, and one of the things that I did in that training in the emergency room, because Santa Barbara is at the bottom of a very circuitous road that comes down from the mountains, and people drink. I go on the weekends and they drink up at the top of this place at a tavern up there, and they come down on motorcycles, and one of the main things that we do on the truck is pick up, we got a call, motorcycle down on San Marcos Road, motorcycle down, and then it's frequent. And then they bring the motorcycle guy in. Usually the injuries aren't too severe, but sometimes they are. And sometimes a person is just really, their bike went down, they got dragged along the road, they weren't wearing the right heavy enough clothes, and they got gravel in their cuts and stuff like that. And my job is to get the gravel out of their cuts. You got to get the gravel out of their cuts. Now, the kindest way to do that is to get the gravel out of their cuts. And so I ask a person, do you want this done slow or do you want this done fast? Because it hurts like hell. And so we have the authority to use topical anesthetic. It doesn't do all that much. It's not like you get numb from a toothache. It still hurts like hell, but it hurts a little less, but it still hurts. So kindness isn't, but you got to get it out or it's going to get infected and that person's going to be fucked up badly. So kindness in that case requires some amount of abrasion, right? And sometimes it does. If we have aspects of our personality that are self-destructive. And everyone has aspects of their personality that are self-destructive. And the even calling a person's attention to that can be abrasive. Now, if it can be done, kindness isn't always doing it sweetly, any more than kindly. Kind would be if you see your kid or a kid about to walk out into traffic, you would say, "Hi, Sonny. Hi, little girl. Would you come back?" You'd grab them by the shoulders and you grab them. And they'd say, "Hey, why are you grabbing me? That was mean." But you'd be saving their life, and you'd be knowing there would be kindness in your heart. There is always kindness in my heart. I have nothing but kindness in my heart. I don't need anything from people. I don't need recognition. I don't need money. I don't need gifts. I don't need acknowledgement. All I have is kindness left to give. Sometimes it comes out that that person is challenged, and we're not used to being challenged. But we need to be challenged, because if we don't recognize some of these self-destructive tendencies, how in the world would they ever fade away? The first part of treatment is diagnosis. There is no treatment that happens without diagnosis. You go into a doctor and they say, "What's wrong?" You say, "Well, I'm not sure. Nothing much. Can't be sure." They say, "Well, I don't even know where to start." So diagnosis is needed. And in order to diagnose, sometimes situations become not a lot, but a little bit challenging. I'm not looking to challenge, but I'm looking for those things to surface so that they can dissipate.
And you said a really interesting thing that you said, which is, again, I think, related to this idea of some true liberation, where you said, "I don't need anything. I don't need money. I don't need them to like me. I don't need to be appreciated. I'm not looking for anything."
Yeah, I didn't say I don't need money. I said I don't need money from them.
Okay, right. And that's...
I like money.
Okay, good, yeah.
I use it. I know how to spend it.
Right.
I've traveled a lot and given a lot away, and I like what it does.
But
I don't like what it does to people, but I like what it can do.
But again, in an exception to the general spiritual marketplace, you don't take money for anything that you offer in terms of this teaching or mentorship.
No, I have a basic idea, which I think I inherited from my mentor. He was in a very different social situation where he lived than I. But I have explored that question, and my perspective is very much the opposite, that the teacher is responsible for the student. The student is responsible for the teacher. And that means in every way. So the student is responsible, that the teacher is responsible that the student can muster whatever livelihood they need to be able to be okay, so that they can work on themselves in whatever way will open the doors for them. That they, of course, are also responsible, but I oversee that responsibility. So if money is needed, it's my responsibility. It's not their responsibility to take care of me, it's my responsibility to take care of them. Now, I do recognize that being taken care of can be a debilitating situation, so we do things together. We've traveled around the world together. If anybody has ever looked at our social work website, they know that we've done major projects around the world to help people. And those projects take money, and we've raised them together. And that's the way I see the best things to do, but not that you can sell your skill at helping people get free. There's something not quite right about that.
Right. And even in some old cultures, there was like a donation thing where the teachers just gave freely, and the like in Buddhist countries, the community just kind of gave donations
Cookies,
to the teachers.
I accept cookies.
Okay.
Cookies. I have a list
Okay.
of things I accept.
Okay, good. But even beyond the material, I think you were alluding to a state of being in which emotionally you're not needing anything from other people, which is a radical proposition, I think, for most of us, because most of us are riddled with need, like, do you like me? How am I doing? How do I look right now? Blah, blah, blah. And you're talking about the possibility of being free from that, and like that not even being a factor anymore. Is that right?
Well, the body needs, so there's no defying that the body needs. Mm-hmm. And one has to recognize that their body needs. So if you need to take vitamins, if you need to eat certain foods, if you need to get certain exercises, if you need to live in a certain climate or away from certain things that aggravate your physical condition. So that need is there because a body needs. Other than that, if one rests the weight of their life on something that actually can hold it, that's the weight of their life. That's where the weight of their life is. And everything else becomes something that you do. And I do a lot of things. I know how to do a lot of things. I like sports. I enjoy a lot of things, but I don't rest the weight of my life on them. I don't need them to come out right. I don't need to win at them. I don't need to succeed at them. I don't need to anything them, because the weight of my life is resting on something that can hold it. Now that is a very major claim and accomplishment, and happens in degrees, but as I say, it also happens in degrees, so that people's needs decrease. People can share things better, not just share things in the midst of a disaster, but share things period. Share things because I don't need to have my own this and my own that and my own this and my own that. I'm okay if we work it together. And there are so many things that are like that make life lighter, make life more humorous, make life easier, make it easier to move around, make it so that we have to do things that are really counter to what we see self-productive to us, like work a job that's meaningless just because we need money, because we don't really have a village to work together with. I very much support people that get together in communities of any kind that are trying to work together. I know it's uphill, I know it's difficult, but it's worth it.
Yes. So on the first point, I hear that when you have that real connection to the source, the energy that keeps things going, then all of those other things that you might, those simple pleasures and things you might exchange with other people are like frosting on the cake. They're delicious, but they're not necessary. You're getting, your cup is full already.
Like I said in one of my recent tweets, I'm plugging my tweets.
He's got a million of them. They're really great.
That kids are playing Monopoly in the other room. The parents say, dinner time, wrap up the game. Right? And the kids said, no, I don't want to wrap up the game. I want to keep playing. The parents said, wrap up the game and come for dinner. And then the kids come for dinner, and then the parents talk about their real estate. You understand? And see no correlation or contradiction in that. But that is the nature of our lives, is the things that could give us joy. Playing music is an incredible joy. I'm a musician. I've always been a musician. I'm still a musician. I love to play. I play music with you. It's something we do in our community. We have set it up so that we have a band room that we play music together. We set up this cool place that we can jam. And music is a delight. But if you need to get recognition, if you need to get it right, if you need to, it makes it a ponderous undertaking. So that if you sing, your voice isn't perfect, you say, I can't sing. Well, everybody can sing. You understand? So the idea of playing is so lost to us, and people say that, well, children play and people have to play, whatever, tennis. But kids can just play. Yes, it's true. But the fact is we can't play. We can't even play tennis. Tennis has become smash the ball and so the guy can't return it, or the woman can't return it. What is the point of smashing the ball so the woman can't return it? Then the game is over. And so you feel like, I won. My serve worked. But you didn't get to hit it back and hit it back and hit it back and hit it back. That's the most fun, hitting it back and forth, not slamming it down the guy's throat. Now, if you do but our culture is slamming. And I'll give you another example. When you're watching the ice skating demonstrations, everybody watches and he's doing these things that none of us could conceivably do. They're totally outrageous, superhuman. And then they do the whirl with it. They spin around 3 times and then everybody claps. Well, why? I could have clapped for any of those things. I couldn't do any of those things if I practiced my whole life. But we're practicing for the win. They go for the win and we practice. You understand? There's something distorted there that we have made the relationships of life so ponderous that we can't have them. That all we can have, how can you not have a divorce? I mean, really, the only way you cannot have a divorce is if you pretend it's okay. You can't, I mean, how okay can it be if you're leaning the weight of your life on the performance of another person? What the fuck? How is that going to work? That can't work. You can't lean the weight of your life on your own performance, much a performance of a person you can't control. And that's what we're asked to do. So we're asked to do that in everything that we do. What we're doing is we're making things that could be light, we're making them burdensome. And it's a drag, because life could be light and enjoyable. And we could have so much more energy for helping those who are less fortunate, because there clearly are those that are less fortunate. Hundreds of millions of them. And they don't get our attention because we're so busy lightening the weight of our own lives. Until we get $1 billion and then we can give away $1 million. But it's really not necessary. If our lives were lighter, we would have more energy to give away.
I'm drawing the connection that part of how a life becomes heavier, as you put it, ponderous, is because of that process of going for the win. We're focused on, as I've heard you call it, the product as opposed to the process. And so there's all this riding on my completion, and I'm missing all the moments in between. And so like even now I'm aware of like, oh, I'm trying to do a good job of having a conversation with you that will be a good product later and stuff like that, as opposed to just being in the process of talking with you in the moment. So how it seems so seductive to just get sucked into, goal orientation. Right. How do we reclaim process?
Right. Wonderful and important question. So you did a very good job.
Yay for me.
The essence, everyone who has in any way proceeded on a spiritual path or aspired to proceed on a spiritual path knows the concept of being here now, being present. Everybody knows about being present. Our concept, though, of being present is being present in a situation that's worth to be present in. And what we don't understand is that whatever your concept of events are, 90% of life, and this is not an exaggeration, this is a statistic that has come from a scientific mathematical study that I have performed, that 90% of life is transition between one thing that you would call an event and the next thing that you would call an event, from here to there. There being a place worth being, and here being a place worth being. But there only worth being a place to traverse as quickly as possible, or as effortlessly as possible, to getting there. Now there's something in that physical motion even, that is self-destructive. Because if indeed 90% of our time in life is going from here to there, we would need to be alive not only when we were feeling, when we were sitting in a situation where it was valuable and we felt, this is beautiful, I want to be here now, but when you were actually driving your car there, or you were walking in the front door there. So a lot of our physical energy, our physical output defies being here now, because it says we will be here now when. Now, even if you happen to be a follower of Gautama and you believe in mindfulness and you theoretically believe this hypothesis I'm putting forth, you can't do it. You can't do it because you're on your way. And if you're on your way, you immediately valued the place you're going to get to more than the place the area that you're traveling through. And you're not going to avoid that unless you have some specific way to avoid that. Now, this particular self-destructive tendency expands out into what you're describing. Every product that presents itself and becomes larger than the process that it took to get there. So that packing our bag to go is something in our way to get there. And so many things become on our way, in our way to get there. The meeting to get the job is on our way to get the job. The first time we meet a person that we want to get to know is in the way between getting to know them better. So we develop a psyche of the future. It's all about the future. It's all about the future. And if you think that you have avoided that, you're deceiving yourself, because in our culture it is unavoidable. One must find a way to see that this is happening and counteract it. See that this is happening not only in big things, but in the minuscule things. Like even in fact, I'll give you an example. You reach to open the medicine cabinet. Now, on the way to the medicine cabinet, you're not alive until you get to the medicine cabinet. From the time you decided I will reach till I reached, you're not alive. You're suspending your life in that time. And we ask people, I remember some years ago I was watching David Letterman or one of those shows, and somebody came, a guest, and they were 100 years old. And David said to him, well, I hear you're this 100th birthday, and everyone clapped. Everyone clapped. That was their accomplishment. They got to 100 years. Now, the content of that 100 years and how many years, moments they were actually here is in question. Because in 1 year of being here, could you imagine how long you can live? And think of the last year of your life, how many moments you were here. And the moments you would think of, well, the birth of my baby, I was here. I climbed the half dome in Yosemite. I shot the rafters at such and such. Or I met my future, whatever it is. Or I won the lottery. You would list things of that nature, and maybe things down from that nature, but you wouldn't list, yeah, there was that moment I reached for the medicine. You wouldn't list that, but that moment contained as much life as all the other moments. And if somebody asked me how old I was, and I said in moments, it would be incalculable to you. There would be so many zeros on that age that if a person could really have that experience, they would never consider when's the end. This day is almost too much. There's so many moments, and as we said in this cow video, and I'm calling it a cow video. I hope you guys saw it. It was a lot of fun to make and very entertaining, I thought. And the first part of the cow, the saying in the cow video is, the cow doesn't say it, but it said in the cow video is we've deceived ourselves into thinking that life is not a sequence of moments. But life is a sequence of moments. Life comes as a sequence of moments. And living that sequence of moments is not a theoretical hypothesis. It's an actual accomplishment that really is required. And it's your job to discover how to do it.
Yeah, that part. I mean, I have been playing with that practice for a very long time, and it used to seem just kind of like a great idea, but completely out of reach. And now I notice during the day that I have moments, more and more moments of presence. But it's kind of a tricky and sometimes frustrating process where when those moments of greater presence happen, there's something inherently satisfying about it. It's like, I'm home, I'm here, hey, this is great. It's like a relief. I just realized that I just left being lost in thought and distracted and stuff. Here I am, wasn't I? A minute ago. And then you're like back to like, I want to try to be present. And obviously you can't really try to be present. It just seems to kind of arrive as grace hopefully more and more frequently. But I heard you say something about tricking yourself into it. So what can you do to cultivate more and more presence without, as you say, trying to go direct and grab it, which won't ever work?
I can't answer that question because I have resisted giving out methods
Yes.
because I see the necessity of supervising methods that are given out, because the potential for misusing methods are equal to the potential for misusing drugs. Anything that has potency has a potential for being misused. And so I don't give out methods. I don't write about methods in books. I don't talk about methods to people that I can't supervise. So I stay away from. But it is a possibility that a person really understands the situation. Situation being that you are moving through space, and forget being present in a spiritual form or in a holy form or in a totality, which is very difficult. How about being present in terms of simple physical movements? For starters, I think if a person really appreciated that conundrum and that they weren't really alive in between or on the way, simply physically, they might be able to develop a method for themselves that would help them in those moments. If they were really, that's what I did. They were really one-pointed and saw it as a priority and were not willing to give up all those 90% of the moments in between here and there, they very well might be able to discover something. That's just how I did.
Nice. And if we're trying to become less kind of goal or product oriented and more process oriented, and it requires real motivation to commitment to be on a transformational path, how do we, I guess I'm asking for advice again, and it's not exactly a method, I don't think, it's a view I'm looking for. How do we not turn waking up or transformation into yet another product that we're trying to get for ourselves?
I hear you. I see that motivation comes from in front and it comes from behind. Some of the first motivation clearly comes from behind because people become dissatisfied. I think becoming dissatisfied is a very natural process of repetition, especially repetition honestly viewed, so that getting a house in another place or moving to another place or meeting a different person, as they say, wherever you go, there you are, recognizing that that may be variety, but it's not really change. It's just variety. It's not really change. So if a person looks at that honestly and personal honesty is important really at any stage, that dissatisfaction will start to arise. Dissatisfaction will start to arise, and people will start to look elsewhere. People may start to look in the spiritual arena. People may start to look just someplace else to do something else. And I think that that's very natural. Now, discovering at that point is challenging, right at that cusp point, because that cusp doesn't last very long, because then there are demands made of you. You have to either come back or go forward. You can't just hang there. So that's where I see the value of having a forevision. A forevision would be something like where you have a flash of another possibility for your consciousness, for your state of being, for your perspective, for your life. You have see another whole possibility, not an alteration, but another possibility. And that can come and has come through the right use of drugs. It has come through women in childbirth. It's come through living in the woods. It has come through solitude. It's come through in different situations. Whatever the situation is, I believe that I have seen that forevisions are needed, because dissatisfaction takes you to a point. But if you don't have a flash of where it can go, it's very, very challenging, maybe even not possible, to start being motivated to actually act genuinely and sincerely and with perseverance to come home, to go home, to return. So I see that motivation and consistent motivation is needed. Dissatisfaction has to be consistent, because if at any time you feel, well, I could go back, what do I need this shit for? Then you will. And if you are not pulled ahead, the same. But in your march, you have to keep your eyes in front of you, so you see your steps. You have to keep your eye on the mountain every once in a while, but not all the time, and be motivated by dissatisfaction. So you're all set.
Yeah, well, I'm reminded of the old, there's an old spiritual that says something like, the little wheel turned by faith and the big wheel turned by the grace of God. Ezekiel saw a wheel way in the middle of the air. And so I'm just wondering, again, it's kind of an abstract question, but how do we both acknowledge grace as the prime mover in this situation, and our part in getting out of the way or cooperating or being a...
I think that's a really important question. I think the first step is to stop calling it grace, and certainly not call it the grace of God, because the presumption in saying that we're privy to this energy that's uplifting, that's always fighting to uplift and compensate for the energy that's trying to push down, that we're equating ourselves to that energy, that we can give it a terminology, is presumptuous and not productive. So I like to look at this force more scientifically. Now, that doesn't mean love and squishiness isn't part of this. And when I say scientifically, it doesn't mean intellectually. It means scientifically more like it's something factual. And it's something factual like light is factual, and that which creates is factual. The minute we give it our attributes, we're pulling it down. It creates us. It's like the character in a book starting to criticize or even evaluate the author. Well, I think he should have written me with longer hair or blonder hair. Why didn't he make me taller? Why didn't he make me smarter? That sounds ludicrous, that a character in a book would comment on the author of the book. It's like a joke. It's like a non sequitur. But in a way, we do that when we equate ourselves to the energy that keeps us alive. And grace is one of those. So I like to look at So I wouldn't use that word, but if I did use that word, I'd define it very clearly to people I'm communicating with and say, this is a term we're using for the energy that uplifts us to finer and finer. And whenever we let go, it will by its nature uplift, because we're not fighting it, pushing it down. All we have to do is lighten and it will uplift. It's our gift. It's our boon. It's our good fortune to have this force. So in Mount Analog, this wonderful book that a Frenchman who lived last century wrote, he wrote in this book, Mount Analog, that at the end of our climbing this mountain and clawing our way up and clawing our way up, there was somebody on the top with a rope cranking us up all the time. Mm-hmm. And all we did was resist. But it was cranking us up. And that's my understanding of this force, which is beyond us. And any time we refer to it scientifically and otherwise, it should have the reverence of recognizing that it's our creator, we're not its creator.
As opposed to trying to create a God in our image or something
exactly.
like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let me check here to see if we've got any questions. Hello, Alexandra and Manuel and Heba, and let's see if we've got... I know Matthew asked earlier in the comments to that wonderful cow video, which is posted on my profile and I recommend, that part of this lightening process that we're talking about is shedding the past rather than packing it along with us. And yet, as I think basically he asks, is there a place for kind of examining or understanding the past, our past, in order to better let it go? Is there some part for exploring the past and understanding it to shed it?
Absolutely there is. There's an importance to it. There's an importance to it relative to the whole undertaking. So I think I've said in that cow video that it may be overestimated. I didn't say it is overestimated. I didn't say it's not necessary. I said it may be, that particular aspect may be overestimated. I'm pretty sure that's what it said in there. Uh-huh. So maybe I can talk a little more about that, because I see a very definite place for knowing where things come from. It's clear in our political situation. I don't mean our immediate political situation, but I mean in the situation of having people lead other people in terms of a country. It would definitely be useful for them to know history, because history can teach things that how things have happened in the past. How did things happen during the Depression? How did things happen during the War of 1812? How did things happen during the Dust Bowl move from the middle of the country to the west? What are the subtleties that happened here? What were the moving forces? I think definitely we recognize that it would be good to have an astute and erudite and intelligent force evaluating the present in terms of knowing the past, but that the present can be changed by knowing the past is another question. And maybe I can say a little more. I'm thinking of the current COVID thing, and the development of a vaccine. The development of a vaccine, the main equipment for development of a vaccine is a computer, because there is a lot of data, and a microscope. The microscope is looking at the DNA strands and exploring and exploring and exploring what'll do, what work here, what are specifics here. So they're exploring right in the minute. They're not looking at how it started. Now, definitely relevant how it started. For instance, if somebody came in with an itch in the groin area to the doctor would say maybe, "Where have you been?" And they would say, "Well, I've been to the red light district in Amsterdam." They say, "Well, there's a very good chance you have a sexually transmitted disease. So let's give you a shot of penicillin and see if that works." Okay. So they would want to know the past, but right then, they wouldn't be treating you with the past. They wouldn't be saying, "Well, let's learn more about this red light district. Like, what did she look like? How tall was she?" You know, they would say, "Yeah, we need that information for our diagnosis, but now that we have the diagnosis, this is what we're going to do." I'll give you another example along these lines. Do you know where the term, the word, or the brand Listerine comes from? Probably not. Comes from a man named Joseph Lister, who was a chemist and a explorer in the 18th century, and he was the first person to recognize that that the conditions in operating rooms were causing infections to happen to people that were getting cut open. Nobody realized that there was a cleanliness needed. He discovered and proliferated the idea that cleanliness was needed. And that was very important. Now, he never put forth that right now, if you have the infection, what you need to do is clean the room. Cleaning your room isn't going to cure your infection. Cleaning the room is necessary to cure future infections. Learning the data where this COVID comes from and who has it and how it's passed is important. But once you get it, you got it. You're here. You're bringing it right here. You're bringing it right to where you are. If you have a personality defect or a personality malfunction, you're angry. You get angry at things. You blame. You get jealous at things. You react to all kinds of things. You're bringing it with you now. Where you got it in the past will help you not to get in that situation where you're going to get it again. But you can't treat that with the past because it's here now. You don't need it. You don't need to go through the past and how you got it. You got it. You know what you mean? You got it. And that's what I see. If you look subtly at every self-destructive tendency that a person had and developed from what somebody laid on them when they were 5 years old or what happened to them when they were 12, they got it now. Now, I'm not talking about traumatic happenings. As I say, I deal with from Sweden to Madagascar. I certainly think if a person is so traumatized that that they need to go back to the past and do that. That's not my area. I deal with more or less the middle of the road or anybody I can help to get to the middle of the road. But my advice for anyone is to look at yourself now, see yourself now, see what's hurting you now. Where it came from has a relevance in the ways that I've said, and certainly you should know that if you picked up something in some way, you don't want to go there again. But as far as, and I'm repeating myself because I see it's really important, that now is the most important moment there is, and that is where my expertise has always come in, is I see it now. I see what's wrong with you now. Where it comes from, we might have to talk about, we might not. We frequently don't. But that you have it now, let's deal with it now.
Right. Because people tend to fall prey either to the idea that if I understand the past thoroughly enough, then now will just kind of magically take care of itself. Or if I have a great enough strategy for how to live in the future, then all my future nows will be great.
It's a nice concept, and if it worked, I would definitely suggest it over any effort whatsoever. But when it comes down to it, doesn't work for your laundry. It doesn't work for your cooking. It doesn't work for fixing your car. Anything that's out of order has to be addressed. Right. And wishful thinking just doesn't do it.
Right. Mm. Well, I have no idea how long we've been going on so far, but as you can tell, Justin is a fount, and I encourage you to check out his website, justingold.net, and as he said, he now has a Twitter account, each full of little gems that we could spend an hour on each of them unpacking, and even though you have, as you said, had this habit, this practice over many years of really flying under the radar and really working closely with a select few people, you have written the books and put those out there, but you haven't really been marketing yourself or putting yourself out there. You've been kind of quietly doing your own thing with your committed people. And yet, recently, you've been making an effort to get some of these ideas that you've been gathering over 50 years of practice out into the world, which is part of what we're doing right now and what you're doing with Twitter, and it's really cool for me to see how the whole community is coming together in this kind of, in the same way that you've done service projects, like we did the service project with Burmese refugees in Thailand. The community has taken on as a service project getting some of these ideas out into the world. Anything you would like to say about that impulse and how we're doing it now?
I think I'm excited about it. I think it's great. I think that my view is to get the ideas out, not to get me out. I would like to stay in and the ideas get out. And I think that there are people that I've known for a long time that definitely understand for themselves, not to repeat what I say, but they have their own experiences and they have their own interpretations. And I think it would be very valuable to hear what they had to say, and that more of these forums should involve those people, because different people have different styles that attract different people, and different have grown up in different ways and have different languages in terms of what interests them and their modalities. So I'm very in favor of getting these ideas out. I think that they're important. I think some of them might appear to shadow other ideas that have been out, and some of them may even do shadow other ideas, and some of them definitely are unique. So I think it would be a richness for the world to get some of these ideas more into the mainstream, and I'm willing to play whatever part I have to play within reason in order to do that. And I'm definitely willing and anxious to share that role with my friends that I've been around for so long, and Tabor.
And I am, as I say, very enthusiastic about this project. I'm going to try to gently twist Justin's arm, or encourage him, or ask him to do this ongoingly, regularly. If that's something that you'd like to see more of, by all means, let me know, and that will give me more ammunition that is worthwhile. But there's many modalities. Got a YouTube channel full of great YouTubes. these 4 books that are available on Amazon under the pen name Jaye, Jaye, Gold, which are all great. So I encourage you to keep exploring with us, and I really appreciate you for agreeing to show up in this way, and for all you have to share. And I'm really enjoying the process of being around these people and Justin and mixing it up with them and learning from the whole way that they have of doing things here, which reminds me of one point that you said in passing, which is, or my way of putting that, I've come to the conclusion that transformation is a team sport, that it's really not an easy thing to do by yourself. I know, because I've tried, and I had no less than the I Ching tell me something like, the learning of the self-taught is one-sided and ponderous, or something like that. So part of what's unique about what you do here is that it's such a communal effort, and I see that as wonderfully subversive. Like there's ways in which people do things together which aren't what we would come to think of as efficient, in terms of product orientation. It's sort of like, oh, I can do that myself, but you don't need it. And we're like, well, you could do it by yourself, but maybe it would be a richer experience. Maybe you would learn more or something if we do it together. And for a kind of recovering lone wolf such as myself, that's like, boo. And I think there's a way that the whole world is actually craving a sense of community nowadays, and we don't know how to do it. We can't have the same kind of small town community that we had in the past, and we don't know how to do this new kind of community, but I see you creating that here. Obviously, I'm excited about that aspect of it. Anything more you want to say about community and doing it together and how that works?
I have a phrase, big mountain, big team. And I don't know what more to say about that. If you're climbing a hill, it's conceivable you could do it by yourself. But if you really see the let's call it the hole that you don't think you've dug, but you've actually dug, it takes a lot. It takes support. It takes views from a lot of different sides. For you to see, get a perspective of who you are, and if you can get some friends who are like-minded and they're willing to support you and you're willing to support them in the different ways that people support each other, it's to a great advantage. I have this discovery that I made within the last week or so, that I'm thinking about now, and it's about how we've been weaned away from our ability to appreciate, and one of the things that we can't appreciate is things that from time to time give us trouble, and even things that don't give us trouble we take so much for granted, and we feel so whatever that term is, entitled, that we've even filleted a term for appreciation out of our vocabulary, and definitely out of our physical vocabulary. And I want to show you what I mean from my last exploration, and this is what I have to say today, is that we have a gesture for hang loose, we have a gesture for peace, we have a gesture for fuck you, we have a gesture for okay, we have a gesture for not okay, but that gesture of appreciation we don't have.
Well, without a gesture, I appreciate you for being here today. Thanks for everything you shared. Thank you, whether you've been watching this with us live or whether you see this after the fact. Thank you. I appreciate you for your attention, and let's keep the conversation going.